June the 23rd, 1944, German commanders in Belarus went to sleep commanding 500,000 men. By sunrise, those men had vanished, not retreated, not surrendered, vanished. The largest disappearance of an army in modern warfare. How do you make 500,000 soldiers disappear? Stalin didn't use magic. He used money, deception, and a trick so brilliant that Hitler never saw it coming. This is Operation Bagration, the greatest military vanishing act in history. By mid-1944, the German Army Group Center held Belarus like a clenched fist deep inside Soviet territory. Hitler had turned every major city, Vitebsk, Orsha, Mogilev, Bobruisk, into fortresses. He called them Festungen, cities that must never fall. Field Marshal Ernst Busch commanded more than 500,000 troops there, controlling the main road to Moscow. For 3 years they had held that line and believed they could hold it forever. German intelligence was convinced that the next Soviet offensive would come from Ukraine. Reconnaissance planes showed massive Soviet movements there. Radio chatter confirmed it. So Hitler shifted his reserves south, stripping Belarus of reinforcements. Officers in Minsk attended the opera and hosted dinner parties. One colonel even wrote to his wife, "The Russians are finished. We see them massing in the south, but they're too weak to attack us here." He didn't know that 1.7 million Soviet soldiers were already hidden in the forests just a few miles away, waiting in silence. Marshal Konstantin Rokossovsky commanded the northern spearhead. A man who had survived Stalin's torture chambers with broken ribs and missing teeth, now leading the largest offensive in military history. Marshal Georgy Zhukov, the architect of Stalingrad, coordinated the entire operation from Moscow. These weren't just generals, they were survivors who had learned to think like their enemy. For 3 months, the Soviets prepared the impossible. How do you hide 2.4 million soldiers, 5,000 tanks, and 70,000 vehicles from the Luftwaffe's reconnaissance network? Maskirovka, the art of military deception perfected over 3 years of brutal warfare. But deception required resources. Stalin had spent 3 years rebuilding Soviet industry, relocating 1,500 factories east of the Urals, producing 29,000 tanks in 1943 alone. While Germany's economy crumbled under Allied bombing, Soviet war production doubled every year. The Germans didn't just lose because of tactics, they lost because Stalin outspent, outproduced, and outmaneuvered them. By 1944, the USSR was manufacturing more tanks in a month than Germany could in 6. Money wins wars. And Stalin had figured out how to print victory. Every night, Soviet tanks moved forward under darkness. Before dawn, soldiers swept away their tracks with pine branches. When German planes flew overhead, they saw nothing but untouched ground. Colonel Sergei Shtemenko personally inspected these sweeping operations. A single missed footprint could have exposed everything. While the real army gathered in Belarus, a phantom army rose in Ukraine. Inflatable tanks that looked real from 10,000 feet. Wooden artillery pieces casting perfect shadows. Painted fuel barrels arranged in supply depots. Fake camps with laundry lines and campfire smoke. Soviet radio operators transmitted in codes the Germans had already broken. Send more ammunition to Sector 12. Tank Battalion 45 needs fuel. Zhukov arriving tomorrow for inspection. Every word was a lie. The Germans intercepted it all, decoded it all, believed it all. Meanwhile, the real Soviet forces maintained total radio silence. Not a single transmission left their lines. Behind German lines, 200,000 partisan fighters launched Operation Rail War, destroying 10,000 rail segments in a single night. German reinforcements that should have arrived in 48 hours took 2 weeks. By then it was over. Even Soviet soldiers were forbidden from writing home. One private, Mikhail Frolov, recalled later, "For 2 months my mother thought I was dead. We lived in the forest, invisible." German reconnaissance photographs showed massive Soviet formations in Ukraine and empty forests in Belarus. A German intelligence officer later admitted, "We saw exactly what they wanted us to see. We were blind, deaf, and dumb." June 22, 1944, exactly 3 years after Operation Barbarossa. Small Soviet units probed German lines, harassment raids. German officers dismissed them. At 4 a.m. the next morning, the forests exploded. 4,000 Soviet guns erupted across 450 miles. 170 divisions, 2.4 million men, attacked simultaneously. The bombardment was so intense that German soldiers 20 meters from the front line couldn't hear their own screams. Eardrums ruptured, men bled from their noses. Soviet tanks didn't fight strongpoints, they flowed around them like water. Within hours, entire German divisions were encircled. Field Marshal Busch begged Hitler, "We need to retreat now." Hitler's response, 9, not one step back. By noon, Soviet tanks pushed 20 miles deep. By nightfall, 35. The Luftwaffe was finished. 6,000 Soviet planes versus 40 German fighters. One pilot wrote, 12 planes took off, 3 came back. Within days, entire German corps vanished into Soviet encirclements. At Bobruisk, 70,000 German soldiers were surrounded. Their commander, General Jordan, pleaded to withdraw while there was still time. Hitler refused again. Bobruisk is a fortress. Fortresses do not retreat. Soviet artillery turned Bobruisk into an inferno. One German private wrote his final letter, "The city burns, we eat our belts, the wounded scream all night. Command says, hold V, but there's nothing left." Jordan finally disobeyed orders on June 27th. 35,000 men fled at dawn. Soviet Sturmoviks caught them in open fields. Only 15,000 survived. The fields were carpeted with German dead. The same story repeated everywhere. Vitebsk fell on the 26th, Orsha on the 27th, Mogilev on the 28th. Cities that were supposed to stand forever collapsed in days. By July 3rd, Minsk itself was surrounded. 100,000 Germans were trapped. Busch begged Hitler for permission to save them. Hitler fired him on the spot. His replacement, Field Marshal Walter Model, known as Hitler's fireman for saving desperate situations, arrived on July 1st. After surveying the wreckage, he sent one message to Berlin: Army Group Center no longer exists as a fighting force. In just 2 weeks, the once invincible Wehrmacht divisions that had conquered Europe were reduced to scattered, starving remnants. They threw away their rifles, tore insignia off their uniforms, and stripped dead Soviet soldiers for food. Stalin wanted the world to see what victory looked like. On July 17, 1944, 57,000 German prisoners were marched through the streets of Moscow, 19 generals among them. They walked 20 abreast, eyes down, uniforms ragged. It took 90 minutes for the column to pass. Most just stared in silence. These were the men who had burned their homes. When the last prisoner passed, street cleaning trucks followed, drenching the cobblestones in water and disinfectant. This wasn't sanitation, it was ritual. Moscow was erasing the invaders from its streets, washing away the Nazi stain from Soviet soil. The symbolic cleansing was complete. Now came the final reckoning. The numbers tell the story of total annihilation. Operation Bagration annihilated Army Group Center. In 5 weeks, 450,000 German casualties, more than D-Day, Market Garden, and the Battle of the Bulge combined. 31 divisions erased, 17 corps commanders dead or captured. The Soviets advanced 450 miles, liberated Belarus, and reached Poland's border. For the first time since 1941, the Red Army stood on the threshold of Germany. General Vincenz Müller, captured at Minsk, later confessed, "We never imagined such deception was possible. You made us look exactly where you wanted us to look. When we finally understood, we were already surrounded." The Red Army that had once been broken and desperate in 1941 had transformed into an unstoppable force, masters of speed, deception, and destruction. Private Mikhail Frolov finally wrote home after 3 months of silence, "Mama, we did it. We destroyed them all. The road to Berlin is open." The world remembers Normandy, but the real death blow to Nazi Germany came here, in Belarus. Stalin made 500,000 Germans vanish, not with magic, but with deception, industrial might, and a financial war machine Hitler couldn't match. But here's the darker question. How did Germany fund this massive war in the first place? Wall Street banks, Swiss gold, American industrialists? The money trail is more shocking than the battlefield. I'm covering it next, so subscribe now because the real conspiracy starts before the first shot was fired. This is Brinkwell. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and I'll see you in the next one.